Welcome to the Nürburgring and the 37th ADAC Zurich 24-hour race. More than 200,000 fans from all over the world lined the legendary Nordschleife to watch one of the greatest challenges in the world of motorsports.
Oh, this is absolutely a special race, you know, it's a unique circuit. Nowhere else in the world you have a circuit like this. You know, so long and, you know, with all the demands it puts on you, especially at night, it's very, very difficult, you know, to drive. Also with the changing weather, because you can have it dry here in the pits, but you can have it wet at the back of the circuit. So it is a very unique circuit and the real challenge to drive. And, you know, if you finish this race, you've really achieved something.
Nearly 170 teams, about 50 fewer than last year, accepted the challenge. And the weather conditions were perfect. Driving a Manthey-Porsche, the winner of the past 3 races, starting driver Marc Lieb, was favored to win again, but surprisingly, he was not in the pole position. Dirk Adorf earned the respect of his driving colleagues before the race began by finishing the qualifying round with the best time, driving a Ford GT from Rader Motorsport. This put him in the optimal competitive position. The weather is really spectacular, I must say, and the atmosphere here is extremely relaxed. At least we're very relaxed, and we've done a terrific job. Our team managed to finish first in 8 rounds, really just in the obligatory rounds. And of course, we're very pleased to be in this position. But we also know who's lined up behind us, and we don't underestimate the competition. We'll keep an eye on them, but we're going into the race with a lot of confidence. In particular, the competition from Audi should not be underestimated. The driver teams, which paired experienced Nürburgring experts with current DTM drivers, indicated that the company from Ingolstadt had high ambitions. A total of 4 Audi R8 LMS GT3s from Abt Sportsline and Phoenix Racing entered the competition. Among them, the legendary blue-gold R8 with Frank Biela, Emanuele Pirot, Marcel Fassler and Hans-Joachim Stuck. Together with the Alpine BMW B6 and the Porsche Cup S, also entered by Manthey Racing, several of the cars in the top slots belonged to the newly introduced GT3 category. Everyone should have a chance to win. Up to now we had different categories. The SP7, the SP8 were the cars capable of winning this race, and we softened things up a bit so that the SP8 cars could still win, but at the same time we introduced the new FIA GT3 category. So there were effectively 16 cars fighting to win the legendary race in the Eifel region of Germany. 20 minutes before the race began, the cars took to the track to give the fans a close-up view of what was in store. This is a tradition at every 24-hour race, and it's a special experience for both fans and drivers. The Ford GT, driven by Dirk Adorf, is in the pole position, followed by the Manthey-Porsche with the start number 1. Behind them, the Audis and Emmanuel Collard in the second Manthey-Porsche in 7th position. The 2 BMW Alpines are in 10th and 11th place. As always, a flying start, and the first group began racing at 4 p.m. on the dot. Immediately, the battle for the leading positions began. In the first curve, Dirk Adorf defended his leading position against Marc Lieb in the Manthey-Porsche. Collard shot forward from the outside lane and took up the 3rd position in front of the Audis. The wild ride through the so-called Green Hell had begun. Striezel Stuck in the Bilstein R8 held back at first, adhering to the philosophy that long races are not won in the first lap. And he should know, since he was the winner of the very first 24-hour race back in 1970. Starting driver Dirk Scheusmann and his Nissan Z33 made a guest appearance in the middle field of the first starting group. The car has been a regular guest in the past, once having been driven by ex-DTM pilot Peter Dumbrek, among others. Within the first few meters, the spectators got a taste of how exciting the early phase of this race can be as two drivers battled it out for first place. Lieb attacked Adolf, who managed to defend his lead. Audi was still reduced to watching the action in front of them, and that was the field as the drivers neared the legendary Nordschleife for the first time. And even in the first lap, the curve took its toll. Matthias Ekström in the Audi R8 was driving slowly in the so-called Hatzenbach. Bad luck for the driver from Sweden, since it's still 22 kilometers to the next box. The Audi engineers will have some explaining to do. Meanwhile, the second starting group was getting underway. Carlos Sainz, driving a Volkswagen Scirocco, started the race in the 5th position. The leaders in this field are big engines with cubic capacities of up to 2 liters. Out in front, the Audi R3 from Raider Motorsport, also a major competitor of the VW Scirocco in this category. But having finished last year with a double win, Sainz is clearly favored to win. El Matador, Carlos Sainz, also started last year's race behind the wheel of a Scirocco and finished 15th overall. Thomas Kohl in his Audi TT is already in trouble. Tires need a warm-up too, especially for long-distance races. Volkswagen has 2 Sciroccos in the race that feature an alternative powertrain. The ones painted red are partly fueled by natural gas. The Audi engineers, on the other hand, decided to bring the R8 with the start number 100 to a safe place near the airstrip. At the top of the field, nothing much had changed. Adolf never gave Lieb a chance to overtake him and never missed an opportunity to drive aggressively on the inside track. Originally, Adolf had planned to drive an entirely different vehicle, but after the Lamborghini Gallardo from Raider Motorsport that was intended for him burned out at the first VLN run of the season, a Ford GT was sent in as a replacement. One of the 2 Alpina BMW B6s also ran into some trouble. Starting driver Johannes Stuck, the son of Striezel Stuck, lost a little time, but the fracture in his gas pedal anchor didn't take long to fix. The 2 best drivers also drove nearly identical lap times. Lieb delivered 8 minutes 47.8 seconds, and Adolf came around in 8:46.9. On a distance of more than 25 kilometers per lap, that's hardly more than the blink of an eye. Ekström finally rolled into the box, where mechanics and engineers were waiting impatiently to push the car into the garage.
Yeah, actually I don't know what is the problem. Kai just stopped when I came on the Nordschleife after 3 corners, and since then it didn't run properly anymore, and right now the engineers are trying to find out what the problem is we have.
Ultimately they diagnosed a problem with the electronic system, but that wasn't the only difficulty Ekström had.
Into the first left-hand corner, someone from behind drove me in, so the exhaust was squeezed together. So I think we would have been needed to pit anyway because the car exhaust was pressed together.
That put car number 100 in the box for a good half hour. But number 99, also an Audi R8 driven by Frank Stippler, had better luck. Audi made it clear they were back in the game. Stippler was instructed to give a little more gas and close the gap between him and the two cars in front. But first he had to overtake Emmanuel Collard in the Porsche. In the meantime, Adorf and Lieb had established a 20-second lead over their next contender, and neither of the two showed any signs of wanting to slow down. Then Stippler made his move at the end of the final straightaway. Collard was racing to win on the inside of the track, but Stippler didn't give up and ultimately won out, just like his teammates Abt and Stuck, each of whom overtook the Porsche in front of them. And already a few cars had flown from the track. The race ended after just 6 laps for the BMW M3 driven by Oleksiy Kikereshko of the Ukraine. And if the car couldn't make it to the box, the mechanics had to go to the accident site. That's what happened to this Honda S2000 from MSC Langenfeld. All in a day's work at the 24-hour race. Stuck landed in the box, but not of his own accord. The racing authorities penalized the 58-year-old with a stop and go. Unfortunately, I had a little bad luck today because I got a stop-and-go penalty, but it was unavoidable because I ran up on Lukas Luhr. I didn't see the yellow flag. I had to pass to avoid hitting him from behind, and I let him back in front of me, which the track marshals unfortunately didn't realize, but I did pass under a yellow flag. Oh well, 3 minutes don't hurt that bad in a case like this when you didn't really mean to do it on purpose and you didn't do anything wrong, and the race will be long, and the car is running well. We have a great team with Frank Biella, Marcel Fassler, and Emanuele Pirro, so we'll see. The leading Ford GT also had to make an unplanned stop, but for a while, no one could exactly figure out what had happened. Marc Lieb's perspective shed some light on the subject. Entering the Adenauer forest, Adorf grazed a car he was passing, causing the car to spin out of control. There was that one accident in the form of a BMW 3 Series I was passing, but I don't want to blame him. I can't tell who's to blame. He definitely had given me enough room, yet I still took a hit from him, even if it was just a light one to the rear. So sure, it's unexpected and you're doing 220 or 230, and I tried to keep control of the car, but I couldn't hold it and then I wiped out. But thank God it was just a little hit, so no real problem. I'd say we were really lucky, and I got enough adrenaline for the whole weekend. But up to then, it was racing sport at its best. After a brief repair stop and a change of drivers, Thomas Mutsch took the wheel and continued the race. But by that time, the car had fallen into 15th place overall. In the hard-fought 2-liter category, the Raider A3 was still ahead by a nose, closely followed by Jimmy Johansson in the Scirocco with the start number 116, and the former DTM driver Vanina X nosing her natural gas-powered red Scirocco between them. At this point, they were in 30th, 31st, and 32nd place in the overall ranking. After 8 rounds, the leading cars made their first planned pit stops. Fuel limiters had been set up so all pit stops would last the same length of time. Compare the Manthey-Porsche with its 100-liter tank and additional weight to the Audi with a 120-liter tank and less weight. The strategy paid off, although not in terms of consumption. We'll get back to that later. Marcel Tiemann took the wheel of the Porsche from Lieb, and the car retained its lead even after the pit stop. Another familiar face from previous years gained some favorable attention. The VIP Pet Foods Porsche from Australia, piloted by the brothers Quinn and Craig Baird along with Grant Denyer, fought its way into the top 20 in the early hours of the race and ultimately came across the finish line in the top 10 at 9th place. Marc Basseng in the Audi R8 had gone into the lead after 3 hours of racing. The man from Leutenbach consistently drove just under 850 and kept the competitive pressure high.
The car was running without a hitch, so I was able to drive my normal rhythm and still continue advancing on second place, gradually and continually. Certainly, if we could keep driving like that forever, it would be a dream.
So after 4 hours, Basseng took the Phoenix-Audi into the lead, followed by the Manthey-Porsche and the Abt-Audi. In fifth place, the BMW Z4 Coupe from the team of Oschersleben Motorsport Arena, the only car in the top 8 not built by Porsche or Audi. And slowly but surely, night fell over the Eifel Hills. Different pit stop strategies among the leading cars resulted in a number of position changes. Dirk Werner, who had taken the wheel from Emmanuel Collard, moved into second place, just ahead of his teammate Romain Dumas in car number 1. They both tried to keep up with the Audi, but also had to keep an eye on their own equipment to avoid overdoing it so early in the race. Meanwhile, the Falcon Nissan was still solidly underway. The team from the Far East learned from its experience in past years and took the race a little easier this time around. And they achieved their goal, taking 28th place after just under 5 hours of driving. With just 13 planned pit stops, and thus among the top 20 teams, they were in good spirits.
It's a matter of just keeping a constant pace. We're nowhere near as fast as the front runner, so we need to just benefit from good long runs. We can do 10 laps easily on a tank of fuel, and we have quick pit stops, so gradually we're coming up the order, so I think we're doing okay so far.
They were satisfied with their 11th place standing at the end of the 24-hour race. The Raider team was also satisfied, having overcome its near miss early in the race. Dirk Adolf got back behind the wheel after Marc Henerici had fought his way up to 12th place. The car's running great. I was easily able to keep up with the Audi car 100. I'm thinking they have nothing left to lose. They're probably running on fumes, and I was still in a relatively safe position. So I've been driving economically to save gas. Drove 8 laps, and even the lap times are ideal. That gives me more motivation and optimism. That Audi he mentions, with the start number 100, by the way, was coming up from behind. After falling into last place after a repair stop in the first lap, it at least made it to 138th place after 6 hours of driving. The Uwe Alsen team, with its drivers Sascha Bert, Lance David Arnold and Christopher Mies, also made a strong showing. Always in the top 10, they achieved their plans. They just need to work on their lap strategy, as indicated in this incident with Alfred Higgers Scirocco. After 6 hours, Alsen was in 8th place. The car is running really well. Tires, chassis, brakes, everything is working great. It's relatively easy to drive good lap times with a minimum of risk, so at the moment we're all still pretty happy. That also went for the team of the Audi S-Line R8, although Frank Stippler had to push the limits of the 500 horsepower V10 engine to keep the Manthey-Porsche at bay. That Porsche was just seconds behind Stippler, with Timo Bernhard at the wheel and following aggressively. Let's look in on Christer Jørgens and the Sartorius Black Falcon team from Kelberg. They entered 4 different BMW models in the 24-hour race, the most powerful of them being the Bmw M3 V8. Jürgens shared the wheel with Dylan Coster, Diego Romanini, and Bonaventura. All amateur drivers, they had no luck in the early laps. They had fallen far back due to a defective power steering pump and were now only in 162nd place. But they had only just begun to catch up. When the race ended, they were the 93rd car across the finish line, and in the 4-liter capacity category, they were 6th. The BMW Z4 from Schubert Motorsport, on the other hand, had a much better day. Claudia Hürtgen, known as a fast-driving Nordschleife expert, was still in 5th place in the overall ranking, together with Stian Sorley, Dirk Müller, and BMW company driver Augusto Farfus. The team was happy with their results.
We got off to a good start, and the first 5 hours were good. The car was in traffic shape, and I hope things go as well for the next 19 hours.
But their hopes were dashed 1 hour later. Hürtgen dropped out early with engine damage. Another change of position up front. When the Audi R8 made a pit stop to change drivers, Rockenfeller took the wheel from Frank Stippler, Timo Bernhard in the Manthey-Porsche found himself in the lead, but had one less pit stop. At this point, they were relying on 8-lap runs. The Porsche consumes an average of 11 liters per lap, the Audi 13. But theoretically, the Audi, with its 120-liter tank, could run 9 laps. Manthey Racing decided to go all out. We've been told to give it all we've got. The Audi is suddenly driving times like 8:40, 8:45, so we've changed our strategy and are attacking now, with obvious results. I've heard we're now only 9 or 10 seconds behind, or maybe even closer, and I think if they want to fight, we can fight too. That's how they went into the most difficult portion of the 24-hour race on the Nürburgring, the nighttime, prone to colorful distractions and low visibility. This shot gives us an idea of how the drivers on the track feel. One obvious difference to last year is the low number of passing maneuvers. You can certainly tell there are 50 fewer cars in this year's race. That makes things easier on the drivers, especially in the dark. After a good 8 hours, not much has changed in the overall ranking. The R8 with the start number 99 is still in the lead, followed by the 2 Manthey Porsches. But the Ford GT is back in the top 10, in 6th place. Nighttime on the Nürburgring. Anything can happen. Decisions must be made. This is where the Nordschleife experts set themselves apart from the Nordschleife novices. A lot of slow cars. It makes you wonder if they were cautioned to take it a little easier this year because of the global financial crisis, maybe. The big teams didn't seem to be suffering financially. Audi and Manthey battled it out eye to eye through the night. The 2 cars in front, the Audi with the start number 99 and the defending champion from Manthey with start number 1, traded off the lead depending on who was in the box. For a while there were no other influential factors. The Nürburgring showed its mild side. There was no bad weather. It was a quiet night, and through it all, that ticking you heard was not a clock, but a fuel gauge. Yes, we're a little unhappy with our fuel situation. The tank is 3 liters too small, so we can only drive 8 laps on this track, while the Audi can do 9. A difficult situation at the fuel pump. And there was more. Shortly after 3:30, the Manthey-Porsche, still in the lead, made a pit stop due to problems with gas pressure that were quickly repaired. On top of that, there was a penalty, a 3-minute stop and go for ignoring the yellow flag in the incident with Marcel Tiemann. Marc Lieb took the penalty immediately after taking the wheel. I just heard there was an apparent situation in which I failed to respect the yellow flag. That was back there in front of the start-finish line, close to the end, where you're going into the Nordschleife, so it's a long yellow phase. But because there's always a car in front of you, you never quite know what the guys are trying to say, because I can't not respect anything when I'm just lined up there in traffic. I think it's kind of mean. Whether it's harassment is another story. Audi, and specifically Hans-Joachim Stuck, also had to sit out a penalty. And later at night, the same car, the Bilstein R8 from Phoenix Racing, lost 2 laps in a pit stop due to a defective power steering cooler, meaning it had no chance to win the title. But Audi was still within its targets, thanks to a total of 4 cars in the race. For us, this is basically the ultimate test, entering 4 cars in this difficult race and trying to look as good as possible. And I think that, at least in terms of performance, we've made a good showing so far. And the BMW Gt4 from Schubert Motorsport also made a good showing. Piloted by 3-time touring car champion André Prilot, WTCC driver Jörg Müller, and sports car journalists Jochen Übler and Markus Schurig. But after Jörg Müller had an accident in the early phase of the race that required a repair brake, the team was thrown back considerably. The sun slowly rises from the shadows of Nürburgring Castle. This time of day also requires special care. In many places along the track, the sun is very low in the sky. But there were not as many bad accidents this year as in the past. The temperature had dropped in the nighttime, but things were warming up again now. In the morning twilight, the Audi R8 from Phoenix Racing was still in the lead, driven by Bassing, Fassler, Rockenfeller and Stippler, closely followed by the defending champion from Manthey, with Bernhard, Dumas, Lieb and Tiemann at the wheel. The stage was set for another day of excitement. In 4th place, the PlayStation Audi, with Christian Abt at the wheel, pressed on with its conservative strategy of driving consistent lap times just shy of 9 minutes. They still didn't want to keep up with the front runners, who were busily heating up the track at high speed. There was never a second to lose, as seen here during a driver change. Romain Dumas finished his turn and handed over the wheel to Timo Bernhard. There was still a lot of discussion going on about the stop-and-go penalty that cost the Manthey team 3 minutes, an unwarranted penalty from their point of view. In the meantime, they had even put in an appearance with the racing managers. We searched our own data records for the moment in which he was supposed to have committed the penalty. He is said to have sped past a construction site, but we determined that wasn't the case. We were much slower, and the organizers have a data system of their own within our system. That is to say, one is implanted in every vehicle, so they could also access this data for themselves. The organizers then rechecked the data and figured out that the penalty was really not warranted. So a time credit of exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds was awarded to the Manthey-Porsche. In case the Manthey-Porsche should manage to drive across the finish line less than 3 minutes and 20 seconds after the leading S-Line Audi, it would win the race. Audi's advantage had melted. The third-place Manthey-Porsche was still playing catch-up, not quite as fast as the two leading cars, but still a good 3 minutes ahead of the fourth-placed PlayStation Audi R8. Here we visit the cockpit of Gazoo Racing and a Lexus LFA. The Japanese entered two of these 4.8-liter 500-horsepower vehicles, but a defect in the drivetrain ended the race early for start number 15, which was driven by Armin Hane, among others. The Bilstein R8 had dropped out of the top contenders after problems during the night with a defective oil cooler and the stop-and-go penalty early in the race, but was still within the top 10 at 8th place. Marcel Fassler had just taken over the wheel. He was registered as a driver for both the Bilstein R8 and the leading S-Line Audi. Although his primary interest was clearly the car with start number 98, and the team still had its eyes on the victory.
Yeah, during the night we had some trouble with our oil cooler. We had to replace it and lost a lot of time. And the stop-and-go penalty we took in the early phase of the race didn't exactly help us. We'll see. Our car is running very well. We're trying to get back up front, although making up for 40 minutes is really impossible. Still, we're making an effort to move up a bit in the overall ranking. And all at once, incredulous looks on the faces of the Audi team in the pit. The leading car, number 99, drove into the pit and then straight into the garage. A downhearted Dr. Ulrich couldn't believe it. The mechanics tried to fix the problem as quickly as possible, but the team had already lost the first-place ranking. The right rear wheel bearing was broken, and then the drivetrain, and I had no more propulsion. We had to replace it. They took me to the stretch of track known as Pflanzgarten and took care of it. The mechanics did a terrific job, making the replacement in so little time. But it was a shame. We were the fastest Audi on the track by far, and we were fighting for the top win the whole time, and ultimately our efforts were not rewarded. After a 20-minute repair stop, Marc Basseng resumed driving. But he had fallen back in the overall ranking, 4 laps behind the leading Manthey-Porsche. The early strategy of driving top speed and keeping the competition under pressure was not entirely successful. Now the PlayStation Audi made its move. It matched the Manthey's times and briefly even took over the lead. But it had also taken one less pit stop. Still, Marc Lieb didn't want to finish behind Lucas Luhr and passed him. The other Lexus LFA with a Japanese team of drivers simply enjoyed the challenge of the 24-hour race at the Nürburgring. They were in a similar situation as their sister car, number 15. They also had trouble with the drive shaft and finished in 81st place, but they were really just along for the fun anyway. This is my 17th year at this race, and I've driven many other races too. But there's no other event quite like this one. It's a never-ending challenge, and you really have to prove who is best, that you're a strong driver. This here is a very big challenge. The natural gas-powered Scirocco, driven by former DTM driver Vanina X, surprised the competition. With her team colleagues Thomas Klenke, Peter Terting, and Klaus Niedzwitz, she made it into the top 20 and ultimately had every reason to be proud. 17th place after 24 hours of driving was more than anyone expected. And Volkswagen proved once again that alternative fuel concepts can produce the desired results and lead to success, as Dr. Ulrich Hackenberg, head of technical development for Volkswagen, emphasized.
We had great weather today, so of course it's very hot in the cars. 10 laps is doable, but it's also pretty brutal. It puts stress on the car, but also on the person who's driving it, for our pilots who accepted this challenge. Recognition goes to the whole team. I'm very pleased and satisfied with our achievements. After nearly 20 hours of racing, the Manthey-Porsche with start number 1 is also in first place. For Audi, car number 97 is now the leader, clocking in just 8 minutes behind, so still definitely in the running to win. The second day went very well for the Bmw M3 Gt4. By this time, the car had worked its way up to 54th place and was still giving gas. Ultimately, the car made it to the top 50, finishing 47th overall. It was a respectable first showing in the newly introduced GT4 category of production-oriented prototype vehicles. The Porsche Cup S from Manthey Racing also attracted attention. Christian Manthey and his co-drivers Jörg Bergmeister and Marino Franchitti were the best private team in the race, achieving 7th place after more than 80% of the distance. Then came the weekend's worst accident. A BMW 330i from Livestrip.com Racing was heavily damaged, and one of the Volkswagen Scirocco's ran off the track with its front end demolished. Fortunately, both drivers managed to escape uninjured. In the Pflanzgarten stretch of the track, at a small crest, Scirocco driver Wolfgang Kaufmann didn't see the BMW driving in front of him and rear-ended it with full force.
One BMW was probably with a mechanical problem, very slow, and he was just in the middle of the road after a crest, a very fast place. And my teammate Wolfgang, I think he could not avoid to crash him on the back. It is a pity because we were running very, very well. The car was running perfectly. And we passed the night, which really, the night for me is the most difficult part of the race. People are really not driving sometimes very carefully, and it is basically a pity. I hope it's finishing okay for the team.
Other teams had better luck. For example, the Frikadelli Porsche with local celebrities Sabine Schmitz, Klaus Abelin, Dr. Edgar Otthoff, and Kenneth Heyer at the wheel. Here they were in 8th place and had every reason to be happy. From the very beginning, we kept our expectations low and said we only wanted to finish in the top 10. That would be really terrific success for us. So, of course, it's not over yet, you have to remember that, but I believe that ultimately we'll be in 6th place, because the Audi with the number 99 is back at the moment and is consistently a little faster, and I think he'll pass it. But 5th or 6th is definitely fine with us when you see who's ahead of us at the moment, and I think that's really a very good achievement. Luca Ludwig also drove a successful 24-hour race in 2009. The son of ex-champion Klaus Ludwig, who piloted a BMW Z4 Coupe alongside Rudi Adams, Arndt Meyer and Markus Grossmann, won handily in the 3.5-liter cc category and finished 12th overall. Frank Stippler in the S-Line R8 did everything he could to earn himself a spot on the podium, but he was too far behind. The third-place Manthey-Porsche was now 2 full laps ahead, so Stippler took the opportunity to give the fans a good show on a beautiful sunny day, as you can see here in the so-called carousel. Audi's mission was to hold on to 2nd place and be ready to take the lead should anything happen to the Manthey-Porsche. That required full concentration, even in the pit. There was still danger coming up from behind. The Manthey-Porsche in 4th place was far from satisfied with its position. Emmanuel Collard pushed his Cup S Porsche to the limit and kept the pressure up on Audi. He even managed to push ahead of the Audi briefly, but there's a pit stop difference between them. And would the last R8 in the race even make it to the finish line? We really think our R8 is reliable, so we want to continue attacking right up to the end, to put Porsche under a lot of pressure. Then we'll see where we stand. Sure, we're driving aggressively, but it's not like we can work miracles and drive a minute faster than all the others. The others are pushing just as hard as we are, and we're just going to continue racing until the end and then see where we stand. Speaking of where we stand, the leading car in the 2-liter category stood in the pit too long. The Opel Astra GTC had to have its engine replaced, purely a precautionary measure. We're now about 50 minutes ahead of the second-placed car, and even if we needed that long, we'd still be faster. We have lap times that are more than a minute faster, so I hope to be back in front by 4 o'clock. And that they were. The car from Kissling Motorsport with the two Fritscher brothers, Jürgen and Otto, team owner Stefan Kissling and Marco Wolf, ultimately prevailed in its category and finished 65th overall. And then there was Uwe Alsen. Slowly but surely, the former DTM pilot for Opel and Mercedes crept into 4th place along with his team colleagues Sascha Bert, Lance David Arnold and Christopher Mies. In spite of the fact that his participation in the race wasn't confirmed until 2 weeks before, which meant he had hardly any time to familiarize himself with the Porsche GT3. Then the Mamero team had to give up. Chris Mamero was visibly shaken. He too had come to the 24-hour race rather late in the game. Even Jörg Bergmeister himself tried to help get the Porsche back up and running, but to no avail. Yeah, well, we have a wheel bearing problem in the rear and drivetrain damage. And of course, that's very, very aggravating since we worked our way up from 15th to 5th during the night. It was a terrific performance on the part of the entire team, but I guess it's not meant to be today. For Sascha Bert, driving for Uwe Alsen Automotive, and for the rest of the participants, the final hour of the race had begun, when people begin taking careless risks. The race is nearly over, concentration is weakening, and everyone is anticipating the finish line. This dangerous situation has been known to turn dreams into rude awakenings at the world's most challenging long-distance race. Oh, it's an absolute nightmare. The last hour is the worst. You hear every unusual sound and just think, good Lord, I hope nothing bad happens. The traffic is brutal. People are tired. I saw that in my last stint myself. Some of them don't even know anymore whether they have to go to the left or the right, so they drive in the middle of the road. And now, especially in the final 2 laps, everybody's giving it all. You have to drive zigzags and try to drive relatively reasonable lap times. One car that drove consistently good lap times throughout the entire race was the Aston Martin V8 Vantage N24. It won in the prestigious GT4 category. Dr. Alexander Kolb, Richard Karner, Maximilian Werndl, and Dr. Olaf Hoppelshäuser made up the successful driving team. The GT4 is a brand new series that was entered in this year's 24-hour race for the first time, and we're very happy, especially about being in front of BMW, our major long-distance competitor, so we're very satisfied. We placed our hopes in this car, and we were absolutely right to do so. The last hour of the race was extremely exciting to watch. The Manthey-Porsche with the start number 1 was unbeatable, but behind it, only a few seconds separated the second-place Cup S Porsche from Manthey Racing and the third-place PlayStation Audi. And that was the situation after more than 23 hours of racing, except that the Cup S Porsche still needed to refuel. That takes about 3 minutes. 3 minutes that could mean the difference between winning or losing the entire long-distance race. Then a momentary scare for Manthey Racing. Wolf Hensler had to turn into the pit again and park in the garage, with just a half hour left in the race. Apparently, there had been a sudden drop in oil pressure, and the mechanics tried to remedy the situation. Marc Lieb also drove his Porsche into the pit stop for more fuel, just enough for the last lap, just to be on the safe side. Marcel Tiemann, on the other hand, could hardly stand the excitement. Victory was within his grasp. And then suddenly everything made sense. Just like last year, Olaf Manthey wanted his two entries to cross the finish line simultaneously. To avoid having to slow down on the track to let his teammate catch up with him, the leader put in another pit stop. But it was also clear that the PlayStation Audi would not forfeit its second place standing, barring a technical defect. At least one of the four Audis would earn a spot on the podium. The last lap was a familiar picture. All the cars let the winner drive across the finish line first. They began lining up on the so-called Dörtinger Höhe stretch of the track. This is always a special moment for all concerned, above all for the final drivers. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for. After 155 laps, 3,933.59 kilometers, and 24 hours, at nearly exactly 4 p.m., Marc Lieb drove across the finish line as the winner of the 37th ADAC Zurich 24-hour race. His teammate Emmanuel Collard took third place behind the wheel of the other Manthey Porsche. Unbounded joy in the team assembled around team owner Olaf Manthey. It's the fourth consecutive win for the crew from Moispat, just a stone's throw from the legendary Nordschleife. No other team had managed that before. But Audi was also satisfied with the way the race ended. After all, this was the first time they had entered the new R8 sports car in the 24-hour race. The company was happy with its rankings, 2nd, 5th, 12th, and 23rd overall. They had shown the competition a little of the potential of the R8. And just finishing a race like this is worthy of recognition in itself. Now it was time for all the participants to relax a bit. A few tears were shed, and more than one tough guy let his feelings show. The 2009 24-hour race was also a complete success for Volkswagen. 4 of the company's 5 Scirocco's made it across the finish line. Jimmy Johansson, Florian Gruber, Nicky Tim, and Martin Karlhofer also took top honors in the 2-liter turbo category. The official standings. The best non-factory supported Porsche was Uwe Alsen in 4th place. Of the 170 cars that started the race, 118 ultimately crossed the finish line. 52 participants dropped out early. It was a special win for Marcel Tiemann. With 5 victories in the 24-hour race, he's the all-time record holder.
Really good result because it was a brand new car. I mean, the first time we raced with this Cup S here in Nürburgring, and the result is a good one. Even if we had a small problem at the end with the drive shaft, the car was really competitive against the Audi also. So we expect a lot for next year.
Next year, Audi will be back for another round, even if they weren't quite as successful this year as they had hoped. Yes, of course we're satisfied. We have every reason to be pleased. Everybody worked hard. The Audi team, the Quattro GmbH, but also the R8 and Phoenix teams really fought hard. I mean, the Porsches are not exactly unknown up here, specifically the team around Olaf Manthey. So it's no accident that they've won this thing 4 times in a row. And I think we can be very proud that we finished the race in second place.
Und ich glaube, da können wir ganz stolz drauf sein, dass wir zwischen die 2 gefahren sind.
To the victors belong the spoils. Once again, experience and fine-tuned teamwork proved to be the key to success. But never before had Manthey-Porsche had to fight this hard to win. The drivers and the entire team had to give their all to win the top spot on the podium. Yes, certainly the most difficult, I would say, but I must also add it's the 5th win for Neues, the first one with Phoenix and now 4 wins with Manthey, and that's unbeatable, of course. I think we just wrote a new page of motorsports history. And the team, too, I must say, winning against 4 factory Audis is, of course, certainly very significant. From that side, I would have to say it's surely one of the most difficult victories we ever drove. And thus ended the 37th Adac Zurich 24-hour race, and went down in history as one of the most exciting races of the series. Great publicity for the sport of long-distance racing, and a personal highlight for Olaf Manthey, who had never experienced anything like this before in his long career. I've been in motorsports for 34 or 35 years. This is my greatest achievement yet, and I think the record will probably stand for a few years. I won't be around forever, and I don't think I'll manage to top this in the time left to me. Yes, it's a feeling I can't describe. Join us again at the Nürburgring next year as we try to recapture the same excitement at the 38th annual Adac Zurich 24-hour race.